Hey, this is Kip, and in this video series, we're going to learn to fly the VisionJet in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. This is part one of the series, which covers the cold and dark startup, taxiing, takeoff, climb, and cruise phases of your flight. The other videos in the series are related to your approach type, and you will generally get 3 different types of approaches for these career mode missions. By learning to do all 3 approach types, you'll be able to tackle any mission that you find in career mode. If you want, you can use the skip to taxi and skip to takeoff shortcuts if you don't want to learn how to start the plane cold and dark from scratch like I'm about to do. So let's go ahead and take off the pitot cover right here, and then the chocks, and finally the engine cover up here. You can do this from the front or the back of the plane. And you can either hit the shortcut to enter the aircraft, or you can open the door, and then when you close it, it'll teleport you inside the plane. If we turn around, we can see the doors automatically closing and locking. And then we'll turn around here, and there are 2 little safety pins we need to remove first. This is the cap system. This is an actually usable emergency parachute system. And then over here, we have the emergency exit pin. We'll remove that. Now I can just hit enter and request our boarding. All right, so we have our passengers. If we turn around, we can see there's one here in the co-pilot seat and one in the back middle. When you buy the VisionJet, you actually have your choice of a few configuration options. One of them is a complete and one is a family seating configuration. Those both have a back row of seats. And if you choose the executive configuration, there's just the 2 seats without the 3rd row in the back. From what I've seen, you don't get missions that have more than 3 passengers, so it doesn't seem to matter which configuration you pick right now. If you have a keyboard, I recommend using the shortcuts for the instrument views. That is Shift 1 through Shift 0. We'll start by hitting Shift 1. That'll take us down to the primary flight display and all of the switches here that we'll need to get the plane started up. Just hit the first 5 switches. This will turn on our batteries, our generators, and our strobe light. Now that we have the battery on, we're going to hit Shift 6 to go down here to the engine start stop knob and button. All you have to do is click the knob to turn it to run. We will hear and see that the fuel pump is on. And then we'll also hit the engine start stop button to get the engine started. If I hit Shift 2 on the keyboard, that'll give me a good view of the MFD so we can see the startup process happen. All right, now that the engines are all started, we can see everything's in the green. If you're doing career mode and you eventually own this plane, these are things you're going to want to pay attention to because any of these systems or indicators that are showing an error might be an indication that you need some maintenance to be done on your plane. Maybe it's not safe to fly, so you might want to back out and do that maintenance before you continue with that mission. Since the engine started, I'm going to go ahead and get our takeoff configuration set already. We do that by just getting our flaps down to 50%. So I'm going to hit my flaps down button. And then I'm going to use the elevator trim to put our pitch trim up into this little green section here. I usually use 6 degrees for the takeoff. If you don't have these keys bound, you can look down here to find the flap control right here. And this is the pitch trim. Next, I'm going to hit Shift 1 again to get a look at the PFD and look at the CAS messages here. That's the crew alert system. So we can see it says the oxygen is off and the bleed is off. So let's go ahead and turn those on. This is a pressurized plane and we can go up to 31,000 feet in this thing. So we definitely want to make sure we have pressurization and oxygen when we're above 10,000 feet for us and our passengers. We can also see it says the probe heat off. We are going to leave this switch off until we're ready for takeoff just because it's not supposed to be on for more than 5 minutes when you're on the ground. So we're just going to leave that off for now. Then we have our parking brake on and then it says fuel quantity miscompare. And we can get rid of the fuel quantity by doing the initialization down here on the center screen. I'm going to click here to clear those cautions just because it's annoying me. And then we'll go ahead and hit the initial fuel button here. This is how we set our fuel. Tell the G3000 how much fuel we have on board. So all we have to do is hit this FOB fuel on board sync button and then press confirm. You'll see the G3000 now knows we have 153 gallons of fuel. The reason why setting the fuel is important is because that actually gives us an aircraft weight calculation. It'll give us our takeoff distance. And most importantly, later on in one of the other videos, when you come in for your approach and landing, we're going to reference our approach and our VREF speed. We'll learn all about that in those other videos. But it's basically going to give us a recommended approach speed based on the weight of the plane. So now that we've set the fuel, I'm going to go ahead and hit back. And the second button here, weight and balance, will actually allow us to go to aircraft loading and put in the weights of each passenger. Now, at the time I'm recording this video, it seems to be a little bugged in the VisionJet. If I go up to the top menu here and open up our tablet, our EFB, electronic flight bag, we can go to flight performances and then mass and balance. And this section seems to be incorrect right now. Like if I look at the 3 out of 3 seats, it says 280 pounds. So we only have 3 people on board. So that would mean 93 pounds each. Probably unlikely. And if you click any of these boxes here, these little squares, if I click the pilot square, it says the pilot is 0 pounds. It says that the passenger next to us is 0 pounds. And now all of a sudden it says we only have 140 pounds. So there's some issues here, but hopefully by the time you watch this and we get some bug fixes for this plane, you'll be able to go into the tablet, click on each seat that's occupied, and then transfer those weights over here into the weight and balance section. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and I'll go with like the 90 pound thing. So we have us, we have the co-pilot, and then I'll put the passenger in. And now that that's done, I'm just going to hit back a few times and hit accept initialization. All right, we're all set on our weight and balance now. And now if we look at the weight and balance graph, we can see that we're within the acceptable weight and balance for takeoff. And this line represents how the weight and balance is going to change as we burn fuel. Since the engine is running, we don't have to worry about our battery running out. So I'm going to go ahead and look over here at some options for the PFD and the MFD. You can get this set up based on your personal preference. I like to go over here on the PFD and go to PFD map settings and turn on the inset map that shows it in this corner. There's a lot of options to explore here, but I like the terrain relative mode. This relative terrain setting will highlight any terrain that's near your altitude. So in the case that it's red, that means it's within like 500 feet or even above your current altitude. So that's an immediate threat to you if you're flying in that direction. I also like to go into the PFD settings section here and turn on the SVT terrain option. This will give us more details on the PFD for runway markings, and we can see runways when we're coming into land and terrain in front of us. It's a lot more detailed than the default. And then down here, if you go hit the down button, we have a wind indicator. I like to turn that on option 1, but you'll want to play around with that when you're in the air. Right now it says there is no wind data since we're on the ground. And then next over here on the MFD screen, you can also customize this screen. I like to hit the map button to have the map here. And if you want it full screen, you can just hit the full button as well. The way to zoom these is by using the little knob at the bottom here. You can see it says range plus and minus. So if you use the range knob on the center controller here, that will change our MFD zoom. And the one over here on the left will change the PFD map, whether you have the inset map or the HSI map turned on. All right, so we've got our takeoff configuration set over here with flaps and our trim. We have the oxygen set. We're going to go ahead and turn on our landing light, and I'm going to turn on the mission steps again and hit enter to announce our taxi. All we have to do now is turn off the parking brake, and we'll taxi to the runway as they indicate here on the ground. If you get this takeoff emergency battery message, this is another thing I believe is a bug right now when I'm recording this, so hopefully that will be fixed by the time you're watching this video. I'm going to hit enter to welcome our passengers. If you have a hat on your joystick that's bound to the different seated positions, I think that's the default on many peripherals, you can hit up on your hat and that'll move forward a little bit in your seat to give you this nice view. You can still see your airspeed, your altitude, and over here while we're taxiing we can see GS, that's our ground speed. Just make sure to keep that ground speed under 15 knots or so. That'll make sure we don't avoid any overspeeding taxi penalties in the career mode. Now that we're holding short of the runway, I got the parking brake on. I'm going to hide these mission steps for now. And we're going to hit Shift 3 again to get down to this camera view. And we're going to configure the plane for takeoff. Now we already have our flap set to 50%. And we have our pitch trim set in the green band here at 6 degrees. So that's already good to go. We're going to set up our autopilot for takeoff. Down here, if we look at the throttle and the auto throttle section of the plane, we just need to hit 2 buttons here to prepare for takeoff. We're going to hit this AT button right here. And next we're going to hit this little tiny button where your thumb would be on the throttle. And this is the TOGA button, take off, go around button. If we go back up here and look at our PFD, we can see our autopilot modes have 3 takeoff indications. So once we take off and we turn on autopilot, it will maintain takeoff thrust with our auto throttle feature, and it will hold our wings level and have our pitch up for initial takeoff. This button right here is the Autopilot Master On-Off button, and this is what we want to use shortly after we take off, so the plane will lessen our workload, Autopilot will turn on, it'll handle the auto throttle for us as well for that initial takeoff. If you have a keyboard, the default binding for this is Control 1, but if you have a stick, a yoke, or use an Xbox controller, you're probably going to want to go here into Settings, and then under Controls, and bind a button to the Master Autopilot On-Off Toggle command. We do that by going to our peripheral over here. I'm going to go to my controller, and then we're going to scroll down and open up Autopilot section, and then the General section right here. It's this first one right here called Toggle Autopilot Master. So I would recommend binding this to like a red button that's on your stick or yoke. There's probably one that's colored red. That's usually the one you'll want to use for the Autopilot On-Off. And if you have an Xbox controller, I found this one works okay for me, the right bumper and then pushing the right stick. So that's right bumper R3. But this is personal preference. Just set it to something that works for you. When you're setting it, make sure that it doesn't have a little number next to it. This little number means that this control is used in 2 places. So there's a potential conflict there. You may hit the shortcut that you set and accidentally like shut your engine off or something. So I would experiment and choose something that's convenient for you that does not have a number next to it, just to avoid that risk of it being bound to another shortcut already. Now that we have takeoff shown up here in 3 spots, we need to set our initial altitude. I'm going to go ahead and just open up our tablet from the top menu and go to the Flight Planner app at the bottom, and then click the route button here in the very top left. We'll see here that we have a cruise altitude shown by default. So it shows 150. This is a flight level 150. This is in hundreds of feet. So if you just add 2 zeros, that'll make 15,000. Or you can just choose feet from this little drop down, and it'll show you the equivalent in feet. So we'll go ahead and set our cruise altitude by turning the selected altitude knob down here. That changes the blue number here at the top of our altimeter. So we just keep turning that, and we'll choose 15,000. If you've used the G1000, you're probably aware that at the bottom of your airspeed indicator here, it'll show our reference speeds before we take off. We'll be able to see the rotation speed and our best climb speed. But right now in the G3000, that's not on by default. So we'll go down here into speed bugs and turn on the takeoff speed bug. This is our rotation speed. Once we're at this speed, when we're going down the runway, that's when we pull back on our stick to take off. So 85 knots is our rotation. And I'm going to turn the climb speed on here in general as well. So when we're rolling down the runway, we'll see that 85 knot marker with a little R as a reminder that that's our rotation speed. That's when we'll pull back on the stick. All right, so now all I have to do is look at our messages again. We need the probe heat on. That is set now that we're ready to pull onto the runway, and just take our parking brake off, and we'll pull onto the runway and we'll do our takeoff. All right, I've already informed our passengers of takeoff and announced our takeoff up in the mission steps. So now we're just going to line up on the runway. All right, so let's do our takeoff. We're going to hold our brakes. We're going to bring our throttle to 100%. And we're just going to watch our instruments to make sure everything is holding fine in the green. And now I'm going to let go of my brakes. We're just going to watch our airspeed here. Remember, we're waiting for 85 knots. That's the rotation speed. We'll see that little R, so as a little visual indicator. Just using our rudders to hold centerline. There's the rotation speed. Pulled back just a little bit on the stick. It's pretty sensitive. And now we'll look over here and see we have a positive rate of climb, so we can go ahead and put our gear up. And now I'm going to watch this little number here that says RA. This is our height above the ground. I'm just going to hold that yellow indicator here as best I can on the magenta one until we get to 500 feet above the ground. And then I'm going to hit the autopilot button. I'm going to turn my autopilot on. You can hit the shortcut that we set up, or you can go down here and hit the little AP button on the autopilot unit itself. And now I'm going to hit enter to contact ATC. I don't want to lose points on the career mode mission, so I'm going to hit enter, get in touch with them right away. Now that we're over 115 knots, I'm going to get our flaps up. And while it's talking to ATC, I'm going to go down to the autopilot here, and now we're going to hit the FLC button. This is flight level change. Right now we're in full takeoff power and just a simple pitch up attitude with our wings level. What we're going to do is hit FLC, and that's going to turn us into a climb mode. And I'm going to hit enter again to talk to ATC. So you can see here now the auto throttle is using a climb power setting. So that'll be reduced a bit from the takeoff power. We can't hold takeoff power forever. And then here it shows flight level change, 165 knots. So that's going to pitch the aircraft to maintain 165 knots all the way up to our selected altitude. Now I'm going to acknowledge the ATC again by hitting enter. This is why we use autopilot. There's so much to do when you're single pilot flying. And when you're managing ATC, we want to take advantage of features like the autopilot to let us talk to ATC and not miss anything. So I'm going to keep following these instructions here. I can also see it says climb to 16,000. I put in 15, so I'm just going to use the selected altitude knob to pull that up to 16,000 feet. All right, we're going to acknowledge the ATC yet again.
Radar contact 6,000 feet. Altimeter 29.84, turn left heading 280.
All right, so they said altimeter 2984. I'm going to go ahead and use this little barrow knob here to change that to 2984. This is going to make sure our altitude is accurate. If we don't update this to what they tell us and the difference is too drastic from what's set and what the setting should be, we'll actually be at the wrong altitude slightly, and they may yell at us for that. So we're going to make sure we set it to whenever they say altimeter 2984 or whatever setting they give us, we'll want to match that right down here by using the barrow knob on the right. If you have a keyboard, you can hit comma to automatically set the altimeter at any point. And if you're on Xbox, you can go into your controls and look for a setting called Set Altimeter and bind something to that. That'll do the same thing. All right, now that we're done talking to ATC, it's been so long that we're already almost at 10,000 feet, but we need to turn around and get onto course. So I'm going to hit Shift 3 to get down to this nice camera view here. We're going to use the autopilot to turn ourselves around and get on course. You can see over here that our course is behind us. So what I need to do is get the autopilot to turn us around. We're going to do that by using heading mode. The first thing I'm going to do is turn our selected heading, using the heading knob here, to straight ahead. You can see my current heading is 329, and this is the selected heading, 337. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that to match those up. Or if you have a mouse, you can right-click on the heading bug. That'll sync it straight ahead. And then we're going to press heading mode. So now we should see heading mode here in green because we hit the heading button, and it's following our selected heading here that we did with the knob. The next thing I'm going to do is actually hit the nav button down here on the autopilot. And if you notice, most likely for your flight, you'll not be close enough to the course for navigation mode to kick in. Some of you may get lucky and you'll see FMS in green here. The reason why it's not in green for me is we have to fly closer to this course first. We're far away from it, and nav mode will not engage until we get closer to this magenta course here. So all I have to do is use the heading knob right here and turn us, and I'm going to turn us towards the broken line right here, how the line is broken to this side. I'm going to turn us in that direction and put the heading bug right over here between the broken line and the magenta arrow. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the heading bug around to the left. It's going to automatically start turning us because it's in heading mode. We're just going to turn it all the way around until we get pointed somewhere over here between the broken line and the arrowhead. And now over here on the map, we can see that it's going to turn us all the way around and it will be facing towards this magenta course. Now we're just going to wait for us to get closer to that course, and we'll automatically see FMS turn green. Some planes show GPS, some show FMS. In the Vision Jet, it says FMS. And as you can see, we're now getting closer towards that route. We're just going to go over here and watch as this line comes into the center. We'll see it switch from heading mode being active in green to FMS mode automatically activating because it's armed, which means it's on standby. It's waiting for something to happen to activate that mode. The same goes for our selected altitude. Once we get to 16,000, we'll see ALTS flashing up here. All right, so we got FMS in green, and now we're expecting it to turn us to the left towards that arrow to get us onto course. There we go. It's making that left turn. And also, we're about to get up to 16,000 feet. Now we can see ALTS, that's selected altitude. It's capturing and going to hold us at 16,000 feet. Once it levels off at 16,000, we'll see altitude hold mode at 16,000. All right, now that we're in cruise, I'm going to go to the top and just turn off the mission steps for now because I don't want to see them. And if you want to get rid of these points here and these blue gates like the ones down here, you can do that by going into your controls and binding a shortcut. If you're on Xbox, you can actually just push the left stick, L3. But if you're on PC, you'll need to go in and bind something to a command called Visual Assistances. So if you look up this one, Toggle Visual Assistances Display, I've set that to Control-Shift-A for Assistances. And then we can go ahead and hit that, and that will hide all the boxes and waypoints. And there they go. All right, so we're just flying along in cruise now. Our job is to monitor the autopilot, the engine information, make sure that everything is doing what we expect it to. And also we need to make sure that we're looking out for any icing conditions. So any visible moisture that we encounter, so rain, snow, or any clouds that we see, as we're passing through them, we'll want to turn on our ice protection systems whenever the outside air temperature, which is visible down here, OAT, whenever this temperature is under 5 degrees, that's positive 5. So we're at -9 right now. If we were passing through some clouds or in rain or snow, we're going to want to go down here and hit these 3 switches for our ice protection systems. The first switch is for our engine, second one is for our wings and the stabilizer, and then the third is for the windshield. If the windshield still will not de-ice, you can hit the 4th switch to turn the windshield de-icing on high. In the next videos in this series, we're going to cover our descent and our approach. Mattering the flight plan we were given for the career mode mission, we'll have a different approach. I happen to have an ILS or Instrument Landing System approach, which is the more complicated of the approaches to do for the first time, but that's why I've split this into multiple videos. Ideally, you'll learn all 3 ways, so when you're doing these career mode missions, no matter which type of approach is given to you in that mission, you'll know how to deal with it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next videos in this series on flying the Vision Jet.